Chapter 5. In the meantime, different emotions were agitating violently in the bosoms of the two lovely heiresses of the Duke. When they reached the castle, each of them retired to her separate apartments to ruminate upon what had passed. Confidence did not exist between them, for confidence requires congeniality of mind, and those of the fair cousins were essentially different. Each princess, however, had a favorite attendant, or rather a companion, in whose bosom she was in the habit of pouring her thoughts, and on their arrival to the castle they parted immediately, equally eager to find their prospective confidants and inform them of all that had happened. Marianne had been the attendant of Rosabella from her childhood, and haughty as the princess naturally was, she was, like many other haughty people, completely the slave of her servant. Marianne was perfectly aware of her power, and she occasionally used it tyrannically. On the present occasion, however, she was really alarmed by the glowing cheeks, sparkling eyes, and the agitated frame of Rosabella, and asked, with the appearance of deep interest, if she was ill. "Mind though not in body," replied Rosabella, throwing herself upon the sofa, and hiding her face in both hands. "Oh, Marianne, what a wretch I am!" "What is the matter?" asked the servante. "He loves her, he adores her," cries Rosabella, staring from her couch and traversing the room rapidly. "Curses on her beauty! Oh, that a look of mine could wither it, or that she could feel the burning fire that rages here." Then stopping suddenly, she gazed upon her attendant with the wildness of a maniac, and pressing her hand firmly against her side, threw herself upon the couch, exclaiming, "Oh, Marianne, why am I not so beloved like Elvira?" "Are you certain that she is beloved?" "Certainly," reiterated Isabella, wringing her hands. "Alas, alas, would I were not so certain! But can I doubt the evidence of my senses? This very day, I saw Father Morris put a letter into her hands, which was enclosed in the address to Sir Ambrose. I saw a blush of conscious pleasure glow upon her cheeks as she perused it, and I could have stabbed her in the heart, yes, exalted her in dying agonies, triumphed in her groans. Oh, Marianne, is it not extraordinary that one so great, so noble, and exalted as Edmund can love such a poor, weak, and feeble thing as Elvira? But she loves him not, at least not as he should be loved. She is incapable of it." "I wonder if Father Morris gave her the letter." "He could not help it, Marianne. It fell from its closure when Sir Ambrose tore it open, and when she saw it fall, even saw her eye rest on the address. Father Morris merely placed it on the ground and placed it in her hand." "I thought he would not have given it to her voluntarily." "No, I think not. I believe the father is my friend, though I own sometimes it appears strange to me, Marianne, that I should seem to prefer my interest over that of everyone else, when I so many times bind him to Sir Ambrose's family, and so few to me. Nay, though I am often peevish and unreasonable with him, he never is offended, and appears to remain still warmly attached to me as ever. I cannot account for it." "He has ties that bind him to you that you know not of," said Marianne in a low, under voice. "He was your father's friend." "Was he?" cried Rosabella eagerly. "Then perhaps he may enable me to clear off the shade that has so long hung upon my father's name. By heaven, neither the gratification of my love nor the revenge would give me half the pleasure." "You had better not ask him," said Marianne, in the same low, mysterious tone. "You can learn nothing upon the subject which it would give you pleasure to hear." Then, changing her voice, she added, "But what of Edric to the news of his brother's glory?" "I know not, I care not. I itself cannot be colder than Edric. When we meet and he offered his hand to greet me, his touch seemed to freeze my very veins. Cold, prudent, calculating, cautious. He has all the vices of age without his excuses. I hate him." You do not then, I suppose, long for the moment when you are to become his bride? Asked the companion with a sarcastic smile. Long for it, Marianne, cried Rosabella, starting from her couch and clasping her hands together with energy. Long for it? No! If all the resources fail, death shall free me before the hated moment arrives! And as she spoke, Rosabella walked up and down the room in a state of violent agitation. But your uncle, resumed Marianne. My uncle, repeated Rosabella, stopping short. Yes, my uncle is positive, and I, a poor dependent and in his power. But even that shall not control my will. Poor and dependent as I am free, and sooner would be a labor for my bread. Sooner would I rather perish in the streets, or endure unheard of torments, and live in the palace surrounded by crowds of adoring slaves, if the price were that I should call and her husband. Marianne, satisfied with the ease of which she found she could play upon the feelings of her mistress, now touched a chord that thrilled the softer emotions. I can never believe, she said, that a mind so noble as that of Edmund can long remain with the thraldom of Elvira. When he comes to know her better, and to feel the feebleness of her soul, he must despise her. Do you think so? Cried Rosabella eagerly. But you deceive yourself, Marianne. Edmund is so blinded that he fancies her very faults perfections. But the blindness cannot last forever, and when it wears off, disgust must ensue. Oh, Marianne, if it were so, exclaimed Rosabella, and sitting down she rested her elbows on her knees and pressed her hands against her beating forehead, concealing her face and remaining absently lost in meditation. Marianne did not disturb her. She was aware that she had given her active imagination a theme to work upon, and she left her to enjoy it, tranquillity resuming her usual avocations without seeming to notice her abstraction. Whilst this scene was passing in the apartment of Rosabella, Elvira was informing her confidante, Emma, who had been her governess and remained her companion, of the pleasure she had experienced from hearing the success of Egmont, from the tenderness of his letter. How I wish I could love him as he deserves, she said, but alas, I fear it is not in my nature. I can scarcely even comprehend what he thinks I ought to feel, and the violence of his manner terrifies me beyond expression. It is not extraordinary, Emma, that his passion, which seems so universally extended throughout all nature, should be alone a stranger to my breast, that I alone should be debarred from feeling its influence. Edmund complains of my coldness, and I feel that he has reason to do so. I feel that his love is different from mine. I esteem and respect him. I have even a sincere friendship of him. But no one values his worth more than I. I should also be very sorry if any misfortune could befall upon him. But this is all. I do not think I am capable of feeling more for anyone. Indeed, you deceive yourself, replied Emma. I am sure a heart so kind and affectionate as yours is capable of love. Do not marry Lord Edmund. I am certain you do not love him as you will love one day, and if the day should arrive when you feel a real passion, what will your horror be at the recollection of the sacred ties which bind you to one who is indifferent to you? I shudder at the thought. And so should I, Emma. But it is impossible such an event can happen. If I were married to Edmund, could never love another, even if my nature were susceptible to a passion, a fact I much doubt. Emma shook her head incredulously. Oh, she sighed, how little do you know of love. I know more of it than you can imagine. In my opinion, people would never fall in love if they had the abundance of other thoughts to occupy their minds. They would marry, of course, but that, as everyone knows, is quite a different thing. Then you disbelieve in love entirely? Not entirely, but I think what is generally called love is the offspring of idleness. When people have nothing to do, particularly if they happen to have warm imaginations, they amuse themselves by picturing an idol of perfection. This they endow with all kinds of virtue, probable and improbable, and they are enchanted with the fantasy because it is their own creation. They soon find a face or figure that pleases them, and this they attach the charms to they had given before their imaginary idol, no matter whether they accord or not. When people are what is called in love, they are like persons in green spectacles. They see everything of a color that does not really belong to it. Marriage, however, lifts up the magic well and displays the real faults and imperfections of every individual. The self-deluded mortals, when they find their mistake, go too late and start back aghast at the appalling spectre that presents itself, crying out bitterly against deception, whilst in fact they have only been deceiving themselves. You reason admirably, but it is only from the head, and not the heart. If you had ever felt, you would perceive the fallacy of your arrangements. I think not, for I am convinced the experience of 99 persons of 100 would confirm what I say, if they could be but persuaded to avow their real sentiments. This, however, they are always in such cases very reluctant to do, and no one likes to own himself deceived. And do you think all love is like that which you have been speaking of? Heaven forbid! No, no, Emma. Do not imagine I am such a heretic to deny the existence of true love. I only think it is very difficult to be met with. That it does exist, I believe firmly, but few, very few are the bosoms that are capable of feeling it. Now I agree with you perfectly, though you could not mean all you before illustrated. Excuse me, Emma, I did not mean what I said, but I did not speak then of real love. I spoke only of passion, or rather, fancy that usurps its name. Real, pure, undefiled love is that absorbing affection that prefers another's happiness to its own. That devotion that would sink unknown to the grave to procure another's happiness, that seeks not its own gratification, but would sacrifice all the world it can give to promote the welfare of another, that can taste no pleasure and partake of no delight unless it is participated by the beloved object, and even then joys in satisfaction more than its own. This is what I call love. I can imagine such a passion, though I shall never feel it. However, that it may be felt I am thoroughly convinced, though even you must acknowledge it's rare to find. Alas, my dear mistress, said Emma, sighing heavily, every word you utter convinces me you deceive yourself. For God's sake, do not marry Lord Edmund. You could have no idea of the romantic feelings you describe if your heart were not open to receive them. Lord Edmund does not— Hush, Emma, hush, exclaimed Elvira, playfully interrupting her. It is of no use. Say what we will, like people that argue, we are sure to remain of the same opinion when we are done. I don't believe anybody yet has ever convinced by words. We must wait for facts, and in attendance, suppose we consult upon that dress will be most becoming for us to wear at the approaching ceremony. Emma gladly consented, and the princess and her companion were soon involved in a maze of ribbons, crepes, gauzes, silks, and satins, from which it would be quite in vain for me to attempt to extricate them. When Edric next saw his father, after a partial explanation that had taken place between them, he was excessively surprised to find him behave exactly as usual. The youthful philosopher was rather disconcerted at this conduct, which completely deranged all his speculations. In the course of his meditations in the grove, he had magnanimously made up his mind to endure every species of persecution, rather than to submit to the slightest degree to alter his opinions, and such is the strange and whimsical inconsistency of the human mind, that he was actually disappointed when he found there appeared little prospect of heroic resolutions being called into practice. It may seem strange to those who are feeling convinced the substantial comforts of the hospitable mansion and well-supplied table that anyone should be found quixotic enough to lament that he had lost the chance of being deprived of them. But Edric's was the age of romance. Prospect, bustle, adventure. Edric's was the age of romance. His life had hitherto passed into one dull, monotonous round, and the prospect of bustle and adventure has, in such cases, most irresistible charms. He also knew nothing of the world, and was almost as ignorant of the real evils of life as the French princess, who, hearing that some persons had died of hunger, wondered at their folly, and said that, for her part, rather than be famished, she would eat bread and cheese. Thus, as we said before, Edric was rather chagrined than delighted when his father greeted him in the morning after their conference, as affectionately as before, and very amicably proposed that as soon as breakfast was ended, they should take a walk together to the castle of the Duke. Unwilling to vex his father needlessly by refusing, and yet fearful of compromising his firmness by appearing to see that might be treachery on the part of his opponents, our young philosopher gave a rather ungracious assent to the proposal, and remained apparently absorbed in meditation during the whole walk. They found the Duke extremely busy. Like many other people who have few real affairs to occupy them, he was quite delighted with anything that seemed to promise a little bustle, and was firmly resolved to make the most of it. He was then giving orders for an illumination and a public dinner to his tenants, bell-ringing, speech-making, and a variety of other things we have really neither time nor patience in memory. Busy as he was, however, he was glad to see our friends, and greeted them most cordially. "You are come in the very nick of time," he said. "I was just upon the point of sending for you. Do you know, Sir Ambrose, it has struck me that the triumph of Edmund's will be an admirable opportunity for his marriage, and of yours too, Edric. What say you, Sir Ambrose?" "Oh, of course, I have no objection." "And, of course," resumed the Duke, "I do not suppose the young men have any. What do you say, Edric?" But Edric did not speak, for, to tell the truth, he did not exactly know what to say. "Edric is delighted that it has deprived him of the power of utterance," observed the baronet, rather maliciously perceiving the Duke grow impatient. "I trust your Grace will excuse me," said Eric, at length recovering himself. But what?" said the Duke impatiently. "I thought," resumed Edric, with a considerable hesitation, "that your Grace did not intend that the princess should marry till they pass the age that would render, that is to say, that does render them eligible candidates for the throne." Edric did not express himself very clearly, as he was not altogether certain of what he was saying. The Duke, however, heard enough to put him into a passion. "So did I," he exclaimed. "I know that perfectly, but I have altered my mind. I tell you, Claudia isn't above 30, and she's likely to live these 50 years, so there's no use waiting for her death. Besides, I should like to see my children married before I die. I'm getting old, and anxiety in these respects increases with declining years." "Then my anxiety ought to be greater than yours, Duke, for I am the eldest," said Sir Ambrose. "By a couple of years at least," returned the Duke, laughing, "for I suppose that is about the difference in our ages. But don't you advise answering me, Edric? Do you think you have the eloquence enough to persuade your mistress to relinquish the prospect of a throne in your behalf?" "I would not wish her to make any sacrifice upon my account," replied Edric. "Confound such coldness! Why, when I was a young man, my heart would have beat like a pendulum in perpetual motion at such a proposition. Go to her, man, and try your fortune. She is a woman, therefore, to be wooed. She is a woman, therefore, to be won. Or rather, what perhaps will be better, I will send her for her here, and tell her my will. Egad, have a mind to surprise Edmund, and let you grace his triumph as bride and bridegroom." "Rosabella would never consent to such a proposition," exclaimed Edric, willing to postpone the dreaded explanation, as long as possible. "I think not," resumed the Duke, "if you woo her with that face. However, you need not distress yourself, as you will have nothing to say till you get to the altar. I will take the rest upon myself, and I have a notion I shall prove the better suitor. I know women well, and how to manage them. I'll defy any woman in the world to have a will of her own whilst she is in my custody. I know how to quiet them and bring them round. You shall see how I will manage Rosabella. She won't have a word to say for herself. Here, Augustus, tell the Princess Rosabella I wish to speak to her." "Hold!" cried Eric. "I cannot allow you to send for the princess till I have first explained my real sentiments." "Nonsense," said the Duke. "However, I see there is no occasion to send for her, for yonder she comes. I will meet her and explain my sentiments, and then it will be quite time enough to talk about yours." So saying, he broke from Edric, who attempted to detain him and advanced to meet Rosabella. "Good God!" exclaimed Edric. "What will become of me? This obstinate old man will tell her I wish our union. For worlds, I would not mortify the proud spirit of Rosabella by publicly declining her hand. What shall I do? I must request a private interview, and throwing myself upon her mercy, persuade her to reject me." "Then you still persist in your determination," said Sir Ambrose. "I hoped my kindness in appearing to forget what passed yesterday had disposed you to comply with my wishes. However, since you seem inclined to adhere to your resolution, you cannot be surprised that I should follow your example, and I can only repeat that if you do not Rosabella, you know the alternative." "I do," said Eric firmly, "and I am prepared to meet it." In the meantime, the Duke met Rosabella, and evidently began to declare his wishes for her, and the color had fled from her cheeks, and her eyes were cast upon the ground, whilst her strongly compressed lips, and she walked silently by his side, showed that it was with infinite difficulty that she controlled her feelings sufficiently to hear him with patience. "In short," said the Duke, as he drew near Sir Andrew and his son, "I have fixed upon the day after tomorrow for your wedding, and though I own time is somewhat short for preparations, you must satisfy to have your wedding clothes after your marriage instead of before, which I think need not make much difference. So now all I have to do will be to tell your cousin the day after tomorrow your name will be Montague." "And do you know whom you are disposing so unceremoniously?" asked Rosabella, raising her brilliant eyes from the ground and fixing them upon him with a look of proud scorn. The Duke shrunk involuntarily with a withering glance, which seemed to fall upon him like the phasal power of the basilisk. "Of whom am I disposing?" stammered he, unconsciously repeating her words. "Of whom I'm disposing? Why, of my niece, to be sure," he continued, arranging with difficulty his scattered ideas. "You are my niece, are you not?" "Yes," returned Isabella. "Unfortunately, I am your niece, and I would blush for an uncle who does not scruple to abuse so barbarously the last legacy bequeathed him by an unfortunate brother. Yes, my Lord Duke, I am your niece, your protégée, your dependent. I'm not ashamed to own that I owe my daily bread to your bounty, but notwithstanding all this, I'm not aware that I am your slave, nor do I think the pecuniary objections I am under you sufficient to give you the right to disposing me as an article of furniture or beast of burden." "You mistake the matter entirely, Rosabella," said the Duke. "I do not wish to hurt your feelings." "Do you think, then, when I am forced from stone or iron, that I am to be told to marry when and where you list without having the inclinations consulted of my affections granted? Look at the bridegroom for whom you destine me. Certainly it will be insensibility itself to resist such an overwhelming ardor." "You are right, Rosabella," replied the Duke. "It is enough to evoke a stone. I admire your spirit. A woman should not be unsought, but won. And he, I own, looks as if he expected you to go down upon your knees and beg him to accept your hand." "You were mistaken," returned Edric, now taunted by the necessity of avowing himself, in spite of his former resolutions. "It is not merely coldness that dictates my conduct. I should have explained myself before, had you permitted it, though I would willingly have spared the princess the public declaration. However, as I am now forced to avow my real sentiments, I openly and solemnly protest that no torment shall ever force me to become the husband of Rosabella. I'm so sorry. Spare me your pity, sir, said the princess haughtily, and interrupting him. I, at least, have no occasion for it, for know that I, too, would sooner experience 1,000 deaths than become your wife. Nothing but the respect I owe my uncle has prevented me from declaring sentiments sooner. The affection of my father kept me silent.
What a considerate pair, and how highly you ought to feel obliged to them, said the Duke, ironically. And pray, if your respect and affection permit you to answer the question, what may it be your high will and pleasure to intend doing now?
Whatever we please, replied both Eric and Rosabella, almost at the same instant. Dear me, how amazingly condescending. So, as long as you are permitted to have your own way, we may have the honor of suggesting plans for your approbation whenever we please. How astonishingly kind. I'm afraid we shall never be able to show ourselves properly grateful, Sir Ambrose. This irony, my lord, said Eric firmly, is unworthy both of yourself and us. I will allow that you and my father have both reason to be displeased at our conduct, as it has disappointed hopes which you have long cherished. But permit me to say that if you had expressed your displeasure in serious, manly, and open terms as you did, it would have been much more befitting your high rank and importance of the subject, rather than taunting irony that you shall properly make use of. Schooled too! By St. William! exclaimed the Duke. Upon my word, these are fond times when a man of any age and rank is to be lectured by a beardless stripling. I did not mean to offend your grace, said Eric, and I am sorry the violence of my feelings impelled you to use language unbefitting my youth and disrespectful to an old and valued friend of my father. Say no more, young man, replied the Duke. Apologies only double the offense. If such are your sentiments, I would rather you declared than concealed them, and I think even insolence preferable to hypocrisy. However, after what has passed, I can never meet you amicably again, and I shall even avoid entering the house of my friend, Sir Ambrose, whilst you remain in it. This was spoken with dignity and majestic firmness in tone. The Duke's voice, however, trembled a little as he continued. I shall be sorry to lose the society of my old friend, and I should equally sorry to induce him to desert you, but I cannot willingly expose myself to insult, and I must accordingly decline all further intercourse with your family. Decline all further intercourse with our family, exclaimed Sir Ambrose. This from you, Duke, and Edmund, my darling Edmund. Is he to suffer the faults of his brother? How do you know that the loss of my daughter would make him suffer? Asked the Duke, sneeringly. Perhaps when the moment came for me to give him to her, he too would make a bow, and humbly asking my pardon, beg leave to decline the honor. Oh, curse such politeness! My dear Duke, I'd rather answer for Edmund with my life. He adores Elvira and loves you as a father. You too have always professed to love him. And so I do. Didn't I rejoice like an old fool at his triumph? Didn't I determine to give him my daughter, and bestow my estate upon him, and without these proofs of love? They were, my dear old friend. And as he has never done anything to offend you, why should not your favorable intentions continue? Why should you punish him on account of this ungrateful idiot whom I renounce forever? Oh, my father, my dear father, exclaimed Edric. Do not say forever. Yes, forever, I repeat, resumed Sir Ambrose. Begone, let me never see you more. I told you yesterday my termination, and as you have chosen to incur the penalty, you must take the consequence. Come, my friend, continued he, taking the arm of the Duke. Let us leave him to his own reflections. Thank God we are none of us answerable for the faults of our children, and it would indeed be sad if you and I were to break friendship that has lasted half a century on account of this foolish folly of an inconsiderate boy. It would indeed, answered the Duke, and it would have broken my heart to have quarrelled with my darling Edmund. But yet it is hard in my time of life to be disappointed in one's fondest hopes.
As he walked away with Sir Ambrose, the tears actually streamed down his cheeks. Both Edric and Rosabella were affected, but wisely considered that they could say nothing likely to allay the storm. They remained silent while the old men had gradually disappeared.